206 bones, 46 chromosomes. But you are the person behind your eyes. You are the person behind your eyes. Let's look around inside. We're going to do it in 4 sections. You're in the self in 4 quadrants. Okay, so quadrant one is going to be your fears and reactions. Quadrant two is going to be your feelings and your needs. Quadrant three is going to be your thoughts and decisions. And quadrant four are your senses and experiences. And as we go through this, I want you to kind of think about this. First of all, there's no particular rules to how you think about who you are inside. So, but this is more of just a simulator of sorts to kind of, and this is more to provoke thought. There's no direct, defined science and all the other elements. These are from numerous set of observations that myself and other colleagues have made just about ourselves and human behavior in general. And so as we look at each one of these quadrants, I want you to keep something in mind. Are these things that we're going to be addressing, are they very important? Are they a strength? Are they a weakness? Do they need improvement? Do they need to be addressed? They're just not important at all. So that's kind of our key right there, our marker there. So to give you an idea, in quadrant one, I want you to take a second before I kind of go through the list and look at the components that we have in quadrant one. Okay, so now here, quadrant one, just by itself, we made a point to put fears in first. And because a lot of times it's awkward on how you can get people to talk about their fears. And they don't probably have a set way or formal way to actually address, or even sometimes to even acknowledge and realize that what their fears are. So that can come in and it can manifest in so many different ways. In the things that are routines and habits, we may not acknowledge the fears because we got the confidence to get those routines and habits and things out of the way. But sometimes our ambivalence towards things, or our reservation towards things, or our caution, because that's the thing I try to warn people about, that I kind of address with people the most. It's not always sometimes a fear as much as it is probably the desire to be more cautious in things that you do. But it is worth it just by itself, exploring a lot of research just around what fears look like. So we absolutely recommend that though. So is addressing your fears very important, a strength, a weakness, needs improvement, needs to be addressed, or it's just not important at all. So you kind of get the idea already of how this would look, right? You don't have to address all these elements of things that we have in the individual quadrants. You just kind of check these boxes as necessary. Matter of fact, you can check them off one day and uncheck them the next day. So, but the idea is that we want to get more people more comfortable thinking through these elements of who they are on a regular basis and being more comfortable to have these discussions with other people, or make you more sensitive to the fact that these are parts and pieces that make up the whole of who other people are. Again, you're the person behind your eyes. And so that's the idea is that what does that look like inside of who you are? Whether that's an inner dialogue, whether that's an inner perception, all those elements drive that. So again, in quadrant one, your responses and reactions. And that's both to yourself, to other things, and it ends up being a people, place, and thing kind of each one of these, what I'm calling elements, are each one of these components and elements. What they're kind of doing is we want you to be able to address those kind of sections of what makes you who you are. So sometimes these responses and reactions are not necessarily to the external world. They're to how you are responding to your own sense of these 4 quadrants. And so the idea is your responses and reactions. Again, that's worth exploring. Just I'm gonna probably do this on a couple more, and then I'm sure you kind of get the flow of it. But is that something very important to address? Do you feel like you overreact, underreact? See, so here's the thing. Even though we're showing these sections in individual, I mean these elements in individual sections, they all communicate and kind of connect with each other in various ways. So where your responses here may be tied to your fears and all these other elements. And so kind of keep that in mind. So your responses and reactions to things just by itself may be a quadrant a section all by itself worth exploring. And then your doubts and fears sometimes work hand in hand, which then of course so does the action part of what we do. So where some things seem like a thought process, I'm saying that the thinking by itself is an action. And so even though I put doubt in here individually, we know that can be plurals, right? And I can't imagine for anyone that has had any kind of years of experience not having any particular doubts or reservations about something before you make a decision, or even on decisions you've already made. because there's so many different ways to get the outcomes that we want in our lives. And sometimes we beat ourselves up trying to figure out the perfect outcome, where most of the time the benefit is to actually try to just think of the best decision that you can possibly make, and then try to be as resourceful as possible as carrying out that action. For me personally, I want people to be able to party with a purpose, to be able to have fun in this life, but be responsible, so doubt can sometimes take us in and out of it. It is worth sometimes sitting and meditating and thinking through something before you take action to do it. And don't beat yourself up so much when you have a particular doubt. I make a lot of lists. I had a colleague ask me recently, they were like, how do you stay so organized? I said, I make a list of everything. And then I change that list as frequently as I have to change it. But I'm pretty much making a list about everything I do. So I eliminate a lot of the ideas and possibilities. And so it kind of minimizes my doubt, but I'm never without it by itself. I put in here just the component of personal list, right? We all kind of got a personal checklist of things that we kind of in our head, whether we're conscious of it or not, that we kind of check off in our head to make sure that we can kind of get through the day. And see, then logic, reasoning, our ability to take in information and draw particular conclusions, to think through the steps of things. Sometimes people don't acknowledge how logical they have to be just throughout the course of the day. Just some of it just shows up in the autonomic responses that we have for us, just in the things that we do. In other words, you get up in the morning, you just kind of kick off your initial habits and routines that you have for the day. You only think twice about it. Matter of fact, your mind is probably preoccupied with some other components, so you don't particularly draw back from the idea of where logic is. But it is absolutely worth it to spend time researching. And YouTube has wonderful videos on logic and reasoning and those kind of things. And the idea of each one of these components is to help you gain a larger point of view and perspective, or to be able to share those insights with other people. Next is imagination. And so I when most people to me when they hear the word imagination, and I'm sure I probably thought this way for years myself, you kind of think of like childhood type imagination type things. But I actually don't see how we survive any kind of communication with anyone without imagination. Because to give an example, if someone says, "Hey, I left my red coat at my house," well, and you're not at their house, matter of fact, you're not even close to it at all, and you've never seen that red coat. So your brain uses its imagination to go, oh yeah, the red coat at their house, which is some distance away. So I don't think people take that as a statement of imagination, but it is. I mean, you have to be able to contemplate and be able to visualize what that person is saying on their side. Typically, we try to think imagination is something grandiose, but I think that's an element of how our brain even decides on logic and responses and things that we do. And then next, our mindset. So keep in mind again, very important. Strength, weakness, needs improvement, needs to be addressed. Not important at all, right? See, so our mindset, because most of us haven't been introduced to a process that helps us evaluate our mindset or help us see how we use this a as a resource to make decision. In other words, if you kind of, and I'm gonna say it this way, if you're kind of stuck in your ways of how you do a particular thing, it may be worth it just to, let's say if you're always doing something with your left hand or right hand, it may be worth it just to make a subtle shift in your left or right hand, or put it in or do something in your other hand, just to see how your brain responds to a change like that. And it doesn't have to be big changes. It doesn't have to be, these the major developments in ourselves that we have to do. So you have to challenge your mindset. To me, is the way you approach the functions of your day, or even your own thoughts and feelings for the most part. And we'll get over to that on the other side too. There's a lot to be said about personality. Some of the root components of personality is a persona, right? It's the way it's kind of the way that we see ourselves, as if there was a mirror always in our mind. It's like, okay, in not the external mirror, but the way that we kind of view how we think we have to be perceived, how we have to perceive ourselves, let alone perceive ourselves to others. And so the idea of personality is that you get to explore that it doesn't have to be one definitive thing. I think people kind of lose that. I think in the idea that we may have different elements that make up elements of our personality, but then we kind of have to connect that to how we understand consciousness and awareness. It's a lot deeper than most people typically address in a basic conversation with each other. And so that's for personality alone. Challenges. And the reason that I put fears and reactions to challenges, because that can seem like a lot of external things, but sometimes a lot of that is generated internally. And so the idea that these, I tried to put as many common components together in each quadrant, but they mix and match. I mean, we would have a massive drawing with if we kind of showed the core relationship between each one. So you got the challenges there. Okay, so next, quadrant 2, your feelings and your needs. So on the feeling side, the idea that we should, I think for most people, because there's such a wide range of what feelings can look like, and that's for people who don't express external feelings and emotions and those kind of things. But for the most part, it's being aware of how those things can be shifted by the little slightest things. I remember being in high school and a colleague of mine and one of my classmates, every that someone could tell a joke and the joke would be hilarious, and she literally would say, "That is funny." And I thought that was brilliant. I thought there was no other additional laughter or anything. She understood her internal emotion enough to express it in some particular way, and everybody just thought that was hilarious. To the point that we always would wait just to get that, that response from her inside of it. So a lot of people beat themselves up about either being too emotional or being too stern and too hard. I think the core thing with that, as long as you're conscious of who you are and what and that you're conscious of the fact that you acknowledge that something makes a shift in an emotional state, whether it makes you sad or happy or all the rest. It doesn't have to be expressed externally. Just as long as you have some sense of that inside yourself. Needs are there's a, I don't know, a million variations of what needs to look like for people, and so and I think people again put a lot of pressure on themselves to figure out that how to respond beyond the basic biological needs of the day, and into what the needs wants can have all the components of a need, and that's why sometimes people will sacrifice for what they want and beg for what they need, kind of thing. But there's an element of just that by itself is, I think, one of the best ways to explore what needs look like for you is to make a list. Is to actually make a list of like all the things that you think you need, and then you may find later that some of those things are really wants, and they can be put into a separate category. And then looking at the situations of our lives, we're gonna have a whole series of these just on the various situations. Who are you when you're in a personal private place, and who are you when you're in the public, and then who are you when you're in the public at a personal private place? And so that's just a quick sampling of what that looks like. But who are you in a professional environment and sporting events and all these other different things too? It's worth making a list of those things too and saying, hey, you know what? Here's where I feel the most comfortable or where I struggle the most. And then what you notice is more about your awareness of things, about self-awareness, and there's no way in the world that anyone can take in all 360 degrees of any experience that they have. I, it's that I know of is physically impossible to do. And but hey, AI and technology is coming up to speed very fast. But from right now, sometimes we realize later that we should have paid more attention to certain things. And we beat ourselves up probably, and that gets back to the connection between the doubt component. But we get back to thinking that our responses and reactions have to drive a lot of it about what we notice. I'm a person who makes a lot of lists, so people are always amazed when I remember things that most people didn't even think were relevant. And so it's easy for me to come back sometimes and go, hey, you know what? And I noticed this or noticed that, but really what it was is that I kind of got a process to help me do more of that. So endeavors, and the reason that that's here in the feelings and needs side is because the moment we wake up and we're just even conscious of the or aware of our moment of being awake, you're endeavoring. You're endeavoring at that point to breathe, to figure out how to meet your needs and how to address the day. Endeavoring is kind of that whole thing of that it's the highs and lows of the moments of our lives and trying to figure out how do we kind of maintain our path on just trying to get through the day, which is the next component, coping with the day. So those two go hand in hand in regards to is being able to figure out how do we take on this sometimes both the peace, the prosperity, and the severity of a day all by itself. And part of even doing this exercise is getting people to realize we're not alone in this world. Whenever people say the word, even just the word work, when I'm in certain environments, I tell them that work represents co-work. There is no working without co-working, right? There is no existence without coexistence. And our emotions and feelings can tell us otherwise, which is up here. But for the most part, that is the whole idea is that we take on this world in a collective, in a collaborative, and we're better off trying to figure out, at least from my perspective, we're better off trying to figure out how to strengthen those components here. So again, very important: strength, weakness, needs improvements needs to be addressed, and not important at all. And so sense of self, the sense of self fits a lot more into, well, a lot of what comes out of fears and reaction side. But to me, a person's sense of self is very unique and interesting because how we maintain that when we're by ourselves, how we kind of acknowledge that that I am who I am. But the moment that we're around something that makes us, well, we don't have that moment to focus on ourselves. I think a lot of that becomes, we have to question then at that point, I am not those that are around me. So who am I now in the midst of that group? And so we want to strengthen this, help, at least on our side. And a lot of time that we spend is trying to figure out, and I know I personally do spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to help people strengthen their sense of self in regards to not being stern or having a locked in mindset or locked in logic and that thing, but actually having a kind of imagination about being able to shape and form and kind of change and become better as you are who you are. So let me tell you standards. So the idea of why I put the feelings and needs and standards, because depending on how you set your standards, most likely is going to set up the things that you need. And they kind of work together back and forth. Like I said, if we could draw lines over this place, this thing would have more lines on it than anything else. And so the idea of that, how your standards then at that point shape your overall frame of mind, even though over here we got the mindset component by itself. I think the mindset shapes first, and then the frame of mind gets locked in, that if you're not, have not been as adapted to change or just adapting, period, then you get kind of more locked into, here's my frame of mind about it. And then again, in these type of exercises, what we're trying to do is expand that. And I mean, if there was a way to enlarge on this particular section just by itself, then the dynamic of that is what is your frame of mind about your beliefs? What are your frame of minds about your, the culture or certain items of what you think makes up, how you became who you are, is what it is here. And now, quadrant 3, thoughts and decisions, right? Most people probably don't put a thought into their first thought. So you'll help people say all the time that, I went with my second thought or I went with my first thought. And so, but what does that mean? So how's the idea of what instinct and all those things may look like? That is worth exploring. And let me tell you, to me, I think I change that list sometimes depending on the circumstance. So my first thought, I can't say is consistent on some things, because I know at that point I'm trying to make out of the best decision for the collective group, and then sometimes having to make the best decision only for myself. And that's not, I don't know if that's necessarily, that's not necessarily something that automatically makes anyone selfish. It's just that when that is always the component, when you're making a central decision about all these other elements and they only at that point concern your outcomes, that most of the time I don't see how that fits into every situation, and when you're endeavoring through the day, when it's a coexisting world anyway. So the decisions that you make get back to the doubts, some of the fears and things that you have. But making decisions to me is a process, unless it's just an immediate decision that you have to make. But for the most part, there's usually time to contemplate, compare, contrast. All those elements get built into making decisions just by itself. And then, but part of that is taking the time to do, to find out as much as you can about the choices that you make. And people go, hey, I get overwhelmed, I can't do this. I'm telling you, your brain will get used to it, because one of the things I definitely need to add on here, but it kind of fits into both the standards here, some of your responses and your reactions, but coming back to your choices and decision making, is part of what will happen is your brain learns to identify patterns. It's no different than learning the timetables, right? One times one, one times two, that kind of thing is two. So after a while, your brain gets to understand it, just as what we're trying to do with these visuals and exercise. Your brain gets to understand that there's a pattern to how you need to process the ideas in your mind. Okay, so personal safety and just safety in general, that's an action and energy all by itself. And yet most people, we don't have overall conversations with that, about how often we have to think about personal safety, the safety of our property and safety of others and all those kind of things. And well, actually, uh, that's why, to me, that's one of the reasons that people have road rage, because while they're in road rage, their mind is in a subconscious state thinking about the possibility of their own life and death. So when somebody does something to them on the road, even if it's slight, they feel like their life was threatened. So now I got to respond back. It may be an overreaction, a response here to some fear that they're not really conscious of in their own particular mind of what they're doing, which then, of course, safety and surroundings go together. I've always told my kids, is that the idea is you got to be aware of your surroundings. There's just nowhere around it. That you can't be so into yourself that you're not aware of what other people around you. There has to be a moment in a minute, in every minute, where you only take, even if it's just 2 seconds, but you take at least 2 seconds out of the 60, where you're taking a moment to try to kind of evaluate the surroundings around you. I've always told people, you never go in a room where you don't know where the doors are, or that the windows are, or where the exits are, because not just because of people, and not just because of the possibility of people, places, or things, but the idea that it can be some combination of all those things, and it doesn't have to be to the point where you're overreacting or over responding to it. Is that you learn to feel that balance there, in where your self-awareness and everything else should be in that moment. And again, the fears come into inside all these can possibly come into all these things. Knowledge, let me tell you, smart is not what you are, smart is what you do. And so the idea that, to obtain knowledge, the core thing is to be in the thought process of wanting to do that. I feel like I tell people I know a lot, but I don't know everything. So I'm forever trying to learn from other people's perspective and what happens in their lives and all those things too. So there's an element of that just by itself that's worth exploring. The details matter. There's just no way around it. And I think the more that people learn to appreciate that the details matter, that contributes to the knowledge, that contributes to the decision making, it contributes to you better understanding your choices. And then it helps you understand your feelings and your needs and your standards, and helps you, define that frame of mind and coping with the world. So again, these are not static quadrants. And so the idea that as you obtain more knowledge, the core, just the thing of knowing, the process of wanting to know, and having that natural imagination and curiosity that will drive this and what that looks like. And then it makes it easier then at that point to deal with the details of the day. To bring all those elements together. And then all of a sudden, where you may have only been able to handle a couple of details about certain things going on in your life, you all of a sudden find out that you don't get overwhelmed by all the details that may matter or are significant in the decisions or just the actions that you may have to take during that day. You know, the word indifference I intentionally put in here because sometimes we feel indifferent, and I think that's an okay thought. I think that's an okay feeling sometimes, and is that because the 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 mind, the body can be ambivalent about some things. In other words, that it's not sure, and we should be allowed to talk through that and say that. Now, if it's a critical moment, a critical situation, you got to make a decision. Yes, that happens, but there has a place where there's no way to be sure. So being indifferent is, but again, to be aware of it is the core thing right there by itself. So now quadrant four, your senses and experiences on my mind, just that corresponds with the first thought component is that, we have a separate exercise called the Life Quest. It's part of the Vision Quest series. If you get a chance, check that out. But one of the things in there, we talk about what are the things you think about, throughout your day, and what's on your mind, because the things that are on your mind are you are usually emotionally invested, or you're physically, spiritually, soulfully invested in those things, and financially invested in those things that are on your mind. Even if other people around you have no idea how many things fit into this section alone. Your overall sensory experience, I put that in there because the idea is that our feelings and our emotions and all those things that are driven through the feelings here, they kind of all connect in the background of our lives for everything. So trying to get people to be more sensory, um, um, sensitive to the thing, to just about anything around them. Again, your smell and sight and sound and all those things is sometimes just being still in that moment and try to absorb as many of those things through your sensory receptions and receptives, and to be able to bring those things, see what that you'll be surprised where being able to take in that level of detail comes into play. Our commitments to things, and that goes in with our just trying to define our experiences. People sometimes are afraid to commit because they're afraid of what the outcomes and the results will be. But then again, that gets back to the doubt part of it. Sometimes the decision making, the choices. If we think that the outcome is going to be not favorable to us, the person is just not going to make a lot of commitments, or they're not going to, or they're going to move away from the commitments that they think the outcome is just not going to be in their favor at all. And yet, I think most people, that doesn't even reach a conscious level for them. They sense it before they even become conscious of it, that it's just not going to work in their favor. So, or if it work now, committing to something that you work in your favor, just like they say, sometimes people can be afraid of failure. They also can be afraid of success. But for the most part, we should be afraid of being ambivalent. This is just kind of status quo, or just or having low expectations instead of being able to use that to treat it as if that failure is not final, and that we don't take the loss. We put ourselves in a situation to learn. So commitments by itself and understanding that list, there's a lot of great videos online as well, and we're going to make some as well, as trying to understand that commitments are part of your decision making and your choices as well. Your point of view, obviously, that goes hand in hand with mindset, your frame of mind. and those kind of things. That's a lot of what we're trying to do in these exercises and videos, is to expand your point of view of things, but with the hope of that's going to kind of drive, that will kind of drive the ability to handle more knowledge, more details, all these other areas of it. And what that simply is just try to take on as many point of views as possible, to try to see things from other people's perspective, from other angles. Try to imagine that if you saw it from the sky, try to imagine if you saw it from, sitting down, standing up, whatever different positions and postures that you may have too. So strengths, habits, mental state, routine, again, is a lot of times people don't give themselves enough credit. So even though we have those elements down here, the idea is that build on your strengths. That's the wonderful thing that can happen, is build on your strengths, and then and address and acknowledge them. And then some of those things, just like anything, can become outdated. So you might have to start on the process of turning some new exercise or new thing that you're doing into a strength. It's just its own process all by itself. Habits, again, kind of address that in the needs that you may have and some of the other components that we've talked about in here before. But uh, question everything. In other words, think about the routine that you normally put yourself in every day. So the habits and routine go hand in hand, right? And so it is being able to question why you have them, where'd you get them from, why did they even start? And then the final thing is, obviously, all this brings it together, and to have a healthy, whole mental state that is stable, and that you're able to not feel like that you have to escape from your own self to kind of feel any level of comfort or peace in this life. We want to help you make this mental state section one of the cornerstones, one of the definitive pieces in here that is able to help you sustain all these other elements that are here together. So we call this the person behind your eyes. This is your inner self, and these are the four quadrants. We got some other classes and workshops and things that we're going to put together behind this. And so my name is Michael Fleming. It's an honor always to serve people and I'm always trying to bring out the best in myself and other people around me. I'm one of those people who was just the eternal optimist and but I'm practical and pragmatic at the same time. But because I know no matter how much we think and feel about things, we got to get the work done. And so, but I want people to know that, hey, you got somebody in your corner, you got somebody that believes in you, and that we want to see how we can do this thing, bring out the best in people. At the same time, we're going to be realistic about the fact that some of these challenges and things that we got to meet in our lives takes a lot. Takes a lot out of us. It takes a lot of things to get it done, and resources and support and all those elements of what we do. So again, absolutely wishing you the best. Um, let's go make a difference together. Take care. Thank you. I'm Michael Fleming. We have my personal YouTube channel is Michael Fleming 5299, and you're going to start seeing a lot of these resources and stuff out there for us. We have created this system called the Care Alliances to help you find resources and additional support in your life. The Care Alliances, we have this thing called the Help Your Me system. You just click the little blue locator on the site, and you also can download the app. The app is called the Care Alliances. It's in all the app stores as well. And again, feel free to reach out to me, contact me, and I try to at least I respond to text fast than I do anything else. And if nothing, again, you can find me on Facebook, and we're gonna have a lot of social media profiles, and we're gonna do everything we can to respond to that as well. Again, the website for the life map is my-lifequest.com, and I'll show you what that looks like. And this is literally the web application. It looks like a website, but it's actually web software. And we actually design apps and software. We're a tech company for the most part, but this is where our focus and our energy is, and trying to figure out how can we do things to help improve communities and help improve people's lives. So it's an honor. We're going to have some workshops coming out on how to do 1 to 5 year life planning. We got some wonderful thing about that. Planning is about being prepared. There's some wonderful things that we're going to put in place for that. You'll see all those kind of things coming out as well. It's an absolute honor to serve you and help. Please don't hesitate to like, share, comment, and just let us know. And I promise you, we're going to do everything we can to help out with the challenges. Thank you and take care.